What you're going for is rugged. Yeah. Cross purposes. You don't? Sometimes he goes back to it too. He said the awesome times. It's not going to be, it's going to be people around. So I've been like, he's like, hey, you do that, so I'll start doing it. Like this. Let's get that light stream. Okay. I'll send some stuff. But you don't know. He doesn't. Okay, little baby. Morning, guys. I like your dress. You guys dress? I like it. Somewhere around. Day after day, just my hyperstream, you know, compressed the hours and still doing what I need to do. This week.
She's in the corner. Come sit.
Yeah.
Two brothers, just what you need. Wow. Better watch out, baby.
Good morning, everyone. Talking about the blessings of being part of God's family. There was one part in a verse that stuck out to me too this week as we were getting ready for it. It talks about when we offer the blessing of belonging. I just liked that phrase, and that Jesus has made us all belong, and we are just extending that to one another, offering that blessing, that whatever life circumstance or lot we come from, that we all belong here, and we extend that to one another. Let's go ahead and stand together as we sing this.
against all hope, Abraham in hope believed, and so became the father of many nations, just as it had been said to him, so shall your offspring be. Without weakening in his faith, he faced the fact that his body was as good as dead, since he was about 100 years old, and that Sarah's womb was also dead. Yet he did not waver through unbelief regarding the promise of God, but was strengthened in his faith, and gave glory to God, being fully persuaded that God had the power to do what he promised. This is why it was credited to him as righteousness. The words, "it was credited to him," were written not for him alone, but also for us, to whom God credits righteousness. For us who believe in him, who raised Jesus our Lord from the dead. He was delivered over to death for our sins, and was raised to life for our justification.
Sometimes the night was beautiful, sometimes the sky was so far away, sometimes it seemed to seem so close.
privilege of introducing our next song. It's a new one by my favorite singer-songwriter, Andrew Peterson. And it's based on one of my favorite scriptures from Romans 8 that talks about how the world, the earth is longing, it's groaning to be redeemed, to be made whole. And we too are longing for that redemption, to be made whole. And we've been given that promise, just as Abraham was given the promise. We too can be commended to hold unwavering to this promise, to the faithfulness of God, that He is going to bring about redemption and wholeness, and that we can have faith in the one who is worthy. I will lead out, and you guys can follow along with Carrie and the echo and the chorus.
Light
is worthy of all blessing and honor and glory and praise. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Children who are age 5 and down are dismissed to go to the nursery, who is the person in the nursery today? Amy. So, you can follow Amy back there in the pink, and go ahead and take a few minutes and greet one another.
So we weren't able to find it.
Good morning. Thanks for coming. The last message delivered under duress, yes. Let's readjust the mic down. So let's pray and get started. Our Father and our God, we thank you for bringing us here together to fellowship. We thank you for your desire to use the foolishness of preaching to share your heart. I pray that your Spirit would guide my words and our ears to hear the message that you desire us to learn in this time together. We will thank you for these things in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Things have gone just typical for this type of a process. I got my computer all set up. It worked fine last night. I bring it in this morning. I don't have the power supply. I don't have my glasses. I don't have anything. And then the short answer is that my computer's still sitting back there on the table because it does not play well away from home, apparently. So I have really not much confidence that this is going to work, or that if it works, it's going to work the way I intended it to. So You guys are going to get it. This is a mind map of my message, and this is not to scale. And frankly, this is not the whole thing. This was taken about 2/3 of the way through the editing process. And I was unable to get a picture of it like I normally do because I kept getting out of memory errors every time I tried to do it. So this is about 2/3 as big as it should be if it were to go all the way to the end. So in my background in history, church was really not an interactive activity. So in November, I was asked by Jason if I would consider being, preparing a message to present to this SOS thing. I said, yeah, I would be willing to do that, but just not yet. So for a preacher, the hardest part of preparing a message, the hardest part of presenting one is actually finding a good topic for it. Because again, in my background, the pastor was expected to do a lesson for Sunday school, a lesson for a morning message and one in the evening, and then there'd be a midweek message. You do 4 messages a week over 50 weeks of the year, that's somewhere around 200 different topics that you have to come up with to speak on, plus various special events along the way and a couple of extra events like, say, a marriage or a death, something along the way. That's just a lot of work and a lot of things that you have to come up with. So I really believe that in order to be an effective speaker and in order to really take the process seriously, the presenter needs to consider other issues about what he's speaking on. He wants to make sure that the topic's appropriate for the group that he's dealing with, that it's adequately prepared for the amount of time he has to speak, the season of the life that the message is going to be, whether that's calendar seasons like it's a fall message or a winter message, or if it's an ecclesiastical calendar like it's Easter or it's the Advent time. Should be appropriate with that. You want the message to be appropriate for the needs of the people hearing the message. Needs to be appropriate for the presenter who's giving the message. And then it needs to be spirit-led and driven. It needs to be scripturally based. So that's a lot on the plate to pick a topic. Places a big burden. I went home when I was asked to speak and was like, okay, well, there's only 66 books and there's only, 107,000 words. Should be able to figure out something. For me, it was really easy. I knew within 20 hours, I was absolutely convinced that God knew what he wanted me to speak on this message. And I, in my best impersonation of Jonah, did everything I could possibly do to not give you this message. I hesitated, I balked, I procrastinated, I drug my heels, I fought tooth and nail like the plague to avoid it, and I begged God, I bargained with him, pleaded, probably said a few things that I would regret if it were to be discovered what I was thinking. Didn't matter. I was forced to conclude that you're getting what God wants me to give to you. And so, even though I was originally scheduled to do this on the 17th of March, my stay of execution was extended because it really isn't a preparation for Easter type of message. But eventually, my time has run out, and your time has run out as well, and so here I am. It's not going away. The message is not going to leave me alone or give me peace until I deliver it. So here is the message. This is the last message. In order to fully explain, there's a term I'm going to be using throughout much of the end of this message that I want to go over because it's really critical to the way that we understand it. My life revolves a lot around mathematics. I'm one of them who is a number person. I do high order mathematics for fun. I do it for entertainment. I did it professionally. I taught algebra in college and was a calculus tutor. Do Sudoku problems constantly because they're fun and they're numbers. And so statistics and probability is a special place in a special from 1 to 0, or 0 to 1, depending on which way you look at it. If you give something a probability of 0, it means it is impossible. It's never going to happen. If you know with absolute certainty that it's going to happen, it has a probability of 1. And so everything else falls somewhere in the middle. If I were to tell you that I'm reasonably sure that it's going to rain tomorrow, you'd be pretty good at assuming that I would be able to say that correctly half the time. And 5 out of every 10 times that I would make that, you would expect that that would happen. It might even be so far as to go like, say, every 3 out of 4 times. That would be a reasonable presumption. If I told you I was really sure I was going to win the lottery, this idea of non-zero probability. English has lots of words to describe how we think something's going to happen. It's improbable. It's unlikely it's going to happen. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. It's possible. It's probable. It's really likely to happen. We have these words that give kind of a range that you can make a guess with, but this idea of non-zero is that I know it's possible that it could happen, but I have absolutely no clue as to what number between 0 and 1 it is. It might be 99.6%. It might be 0.00096%. I just don't know. So anytime I use the term certain, it's going to happen. Impossible, never going to happen. But if I use non-zero, it's possible, but I have no idea what I'm talking about as to the actual numbers. Fair enough? Okay. Now, again, in my history, church was not really a group participation activity. I spent most of my adult life as a Baptist, and so usually a head nod or a murmured amen type of thing might be appropriate. Closing of an eye, bowing of a head, maybe a raising of a hand, that was it. But for this opportunity here, I have a quiz. And so what I want to do is, I have to click here, click. The ground rules, group participation. Okay. Not really interactive. Apparently I got sidetracked here. It's a thought experiment. I'm going to present you with a question, and at the appropriate time, you will respond by raising a hand. Fair enough? This is, I wanted to discuss an almost standard piece of equipment. And I say almost because it's not certain that your devices have it, but it's also a non-zero probability that any given gasoline-powered device will have this fuel level indicator, a gas gauge. My motorcycle had a KZ900 Kawasaki that did not have a gas gauge. And so I either had to pop the lid and look inside if there was gas in it, or rock the bike and listen to it slosh around. My lawnmower never had it. My line trimmer never had it. The hedge trimmers, all of those little engines, and, none of those had that. And I've had a couple of well-used cars that the gas gauge was questionable whether it was working or not. I mean, some days it would, some days not so much. Non-zero probability gas gauge. And the opening up the lid and looking inside it didn't work, neither did the shake the vehicle, so you kind of sort of had to guess. But for this demonstration, I want to present to you the gas gauge of a 1969 Pontiac Catalina. It has an F to indicate full. It has an E to indicate empty. There's a nondescript series of divisions, usually in quarters, on most gas gauges. And it has been my experience that a large number of gas gauges also have a gap in them. That is, the magic space underneath the E line that you can still drive at your own peril. Now, this particular gauge on a 1969 Pontiac Catalina, if you had your hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2 like you're supposed to, and you extended your right index finger, it looks like the left one on you from your point of view, but from mine, it's the right one, that would point right directly at where the gas gauge was. And you could almost reach out and touch it from where you were sitting at the driver's seat. So what we want to do is we want to think of this concept of the gas gauge in context of life. So the question is, if your gas gauge starts at full when you're born, and when you die, if it's empty, the quiz question today is, where is your gas gauge at today? It's a multiple guess test. You're not expected necessarily, there's no correct right or wrong answer. This is kind of your best guess part of this scientific experiment. So here's your choices. B is, I got about a half a tank, no need to sweat it. I can go, continue on life as regular. Answer C is, I'm towards a quarter of a tank. I should start thinking harder about maybe finding a gas station along the way. So, 5 answers. This is group participation. Show of hands. How many people have a full gas tank? This is where I actually take a count here. Okay. How many people have half tank? Okay. Who's running around a quarter of a tank? Anybody approaching empty in the room? That's an easy one to write down. And finally, who is absolutely clueless? That's the wrong answer, sorry. I clicked it, but it didn't go. And there's a bouquet about that. So now, according to the latest technology in swag, I have come up with the answer that answer B appears to be the most common response. That people are running around with about a half a tank. That concludes the group participation part of our experiment. So with the group participation over, now I want to turn to time in general. And Albert Einstein was right. Time is relative. Pretty much time, or rather the passing of time by our perception, changes on what's going on in our lives. Time seems to pass very, very slowly when you're at a bad movie or taking a test or you're unprepared or ask John Nugent today. If you're experiencing horrible pain, time goes really slowly. If you're watching the clock, I think the typical 2-minute ending of any basketball game lasts at least an hour, at least according to the clock on my microwave. So in other words, time passes slowly when you're having the worst time of your life. By contrast, time seems to go faster when you're having a great time watching a movie, at weekends and vacations. The clock runs like this. The idea that also not only is the speed of the clock, but the speed of the calendar changes based on where we are in life. Actually, I think I went too far here. Our internal age versus the external age depends on where the gas gauge is in our life. So when you are young, you think, I really wish I could just be a little bit older. I could grow up a little bit. So then I would have the ability to do more things. I could go places where I want to go, or I could stay up late. I don't have to take a nap in the afternoon, for example. I also would be able to make decisions for myself as to the kind of things that I wanted to do. Like, I could choose what I wanted to eat. Pizza every day. Don't have to take that bath every night or go sit in the corner and rest until you get a better attitude things. No sitting down. I could ride my bicycle anytime I wanted to. I'm not sure, but it kind of sort of sounds from talking to younger people that the sweet spot is somewhere between 18 and 25-ish, kind of somewhere. You'll find out that the age that they think they are on the inside doesn't necessarily match up with the age on the calendar. There's a commercial I saw where the guy who's in there is doing something and says, according to the calendar, I'm 53 years old, but inside, I'm still 35. And I thought, yeah, that sounds about right. Actually, with this idea is that when you are older, if you were younger, you could do less things. You could stay home, for instance. You could take a nap. You could go to bed early. You would be able to decide things for yourself, like what you wanted to eat. I think I'll have a salad. I can soak those muscles in the bath every day. I can sit down whenever I want to. Or I can go for a ride on my little Amiga-powered scooter cart thing. So it kind of sort of looks like, well, another thing is that once you reach 30-ish numbers, then a indication of your aging process is that God introduces you to chronic pain. And pain is God's way of saying that, hey, you're not 30 anymore, or 25, or 20, or 40, or whatever age you want to insert in there. It's a reminder that the calendar is going round and round and round also. And again, if you ask experienced people what the sweet spot is, again, it kind of sort of says like, well, there was a saying that 40 was the new 30, so 30 is kind of like that target number, 25 to 35 type range. And there, a couple of years ago, 50 was the new 30. I just seen here the other day that 60 is the new 30. So I'm hoping in the next 6 or 7 years, 70 becomes the new 30, but we'll kind of have to wait on that one. So time changes differently on the outside than on the inside. And one of my favorite statements as a minor diversion about time is this one. Time flies like an arrow, fruit flies like a banana. I actually did a post on that one time and discussed it. So we got differences between how fast time moves on the inside and the outside. Let's look at the external. What is a year anyways? How long does it take for a year to pass? On the calendar, it's a 12-month period of time. It says it's also 4 seasons, but because the seasons are different lengths of time, it actually, summer solstice just happened, and it doesn't feel like it's the middle of summer already. But we still have that. Those 12 months are divided into 52 weeks. Each week consists of 7 days, so we have 365 days. Now, all these numbers are approximate because you have leap years, you have leap seconds occasionally put in, you have the additional conversion on certain century boundaries where it's divisible by 400, but it's not an odd number or something. I don't even pay any attention, but the next one is about 317 years away, so we don't have to worry about it. So these 365 days Each of them has 24 hours, so that works out to 8,700 hours a year. Each hour in December, each minute has 60 seconds, so there are 31,536,000 seconds that make up a year. And if that's not granular enough for you, if that's not enough of a measurement, there's 3.153 million trillion shakes in a year. What's a shake, you ask? Well, it is, according to, it's not a beverage flavor. It is a unit of time equal to 10 nanoseconds. And where that came from was back in the days of the Manhattan Project, last millennium. The nuclear physics scientists needed to establish a time frame for how fast chain reactions take place. It takes about 10 nanoseconds for a neutron from an atom fission to find another atom, causing it to fission. So the length of time for one step in a chain reaction is 10 nanoseconds. And they came up with the term shake, as in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail, as being a really short interval of time. So from the Manhattan Project, 10 nanoseconds is a convenient specific interval to connect to. In any case, 3 million trillion shakes. Year passes according to any of those scales that you want to do, pretty much without notice, without attention, or without any desire. It's found in time behind us. It's now time to present the last message. You are going to die. You are going to die. Say again? Yeah. In typical preacher fashion, let me restate this in a 5-point message. You are going to die. This message is personal. It's not about some random person. This is about you. You are going to die. This message is promised. Your demise is a foregone conclusion, certain to occur unless Jesus makes it back in time to establish his kingdom bodily on the earth physically. You can hope for it, but don't count on it, because it isn't going to happen anytime soon, according to historic precedents. The third way to restate this is that you are going to die. This message is prophetic. There's alliterative form here. It's a future event, evidence being you're listening, so it hasn't happened yet. But it will. Science and technology notwithstanding, they haven't made it far enough along to stop the death process. Spoiler alert, they are never going to figure that one out either. So, point 4. You are going to die. Okay, this is a stretch, I admit it. Really should be slammed into the next word and just make it like the way it would make sense, but I was on a roll. I got, this word, this step is prepositional. Got that P word in there. Merriam-Webster's dictionary link says that the word to can be used to indicate purpose, intention, tendency, result, or end, or to show that it is, the verb following it is in the infinitive form. So let's press on to point 5. You are going to die! That's the point of the message, the kicker. End of the game. Roll the credits. It's the ultimate magic trick. One moment you're here, and then Fuji Panuli, poof! You're not. You won't be here. Won't do things, won't go places, won't see people. the last message, you're going to die. Typically, when presented with this, that gives people the Egyptian river effect syndrome. You're in denial. Bad joke. Everybody's in denial. Okay, if you think about it, everyone knows that it's going to happen, that they're going to die, but frankly, nobody believes it's going to happen. I mean, it happens to somebody, but not me. I'm going to live forever. That's our own personal opinion. So let's look at history. Sure. How about Gandhi or Martin Luther King or President Lincoln? Oh, wait, you can't. They're dead. So let's look at scriptures. Genesis 2. God tells Adam in verses 17 that if you eat of the fruit on the day that you eat of it, you will surely die. A couple verses later in verse 19, that your eventual location is in the ground, because from dust you came, dust you're going back. The idea that death was common to everybody also shows up in Numbers. In number 16, there's a description of the sons of Korath and how they were protesting about their ministry and the service, and they were calling Moses out, and Moses, God decides that, step back, I'm going to wipe these people off the face of the earth and start all over again. He says, no, wait, you don't want to do that. God, just deal with the people involved. And so Moses tells the people that in verse 29, if these men die like normal people, that God didn't call me. But if they die like, say, I don't know, the ground opens up and swallows them in and then crushes them into little tiny pieces and then closes it back over again, then you can be sure that God sent me. And they did. They died the common death of all men. I actually am confused because I have two screens here and I have to keep track of which one I'm looking at, because yours is one behind mine. So, in Romans, Paul talks about the idea that sin caused death, death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned, in Romans 5:12. I went through in my Bible program and looked at all 579 places where the word die or death were used. And in my opinion, the clearest explanation, the clearest example of the fact that death is common to all men shows up in Exodus 1:6. It says, Joseph died and all his brethren and all that generation. It's like everyone just wiped the whole place clear. Everybody died. So let's assume, for sake of time and argument, that we accept the idea that we're going to die, whether we want to or not. While we can reach that kind of agreement, sadly, the idea is that this is something that will happen far in the future. This misunderstanding about time is so prevalent and so great that even the government believes this. This is a governmental gas gauge. It is, from the Social Security Administration website, it is a table of period life expectancy at a given age. And according to their description, it says that for this table, the period life, I'm quoting now, period life expectancy at a given age is the average remaining number of years expected prior to death for a person at that exact age born on January 1st, using the mortality rates for 2016 over the course of his or her remaining life. So the short answer is that if you are at whatever age it says in the first column on January the 1st of 2016, that the chance probability of you dying is a number. The number of lives left was, assuming that at birth there were 100,000 people to start with, how many would be left? And then it tells how many years you're going to continue to live if you are male in column 4, if you are female in the column on the far right. So, hypothetical situation, if you look at, this table goes from 0 to 119. The numbers at the very end of the column do not look good for the 119-year-olds, by the way. And so, this is interesting. It's created and based on actual numbers gathered by the government, so we can presume that this table is true. But there's a really big flaw in it, because it's totally useless when we're dealing with small groups of people. Any individual, this table is totally worthless. A basic understanding in statistical analysis, often unstated, is that the rules that you play with that deal with large numbers do not apply in small number groups, and especially if that number is 1. So while this table says if you are a male who was born on January 1st and was 27 in 1989, there should live another 50.47 years and die in 2066. What it doesn't say is there's a non-zero probability that you will be struck by a bus as you are walking home. It just continues to wander on. So of the 97,700 people remaining that were born on January 1st of 1989, 163 of them is not going to make it till 2017. But it doesn't say which 200 people that is. Might be you, might not. There's no way of knowing from this table. So timing is important. In fact, timing is everything. This is the bridge and the chorus from a song from my childhood. Does anybody really know what time it is? By the band formerly known as the Chicago Transit Authority. In the big picture of life. Actually, this is a lot more descriptive and a lot more accurate today than it was in 1969 when they first released it. I don't have time to run around. In the big picture of life, nobody knows what time it is. Nobody knows. Just look around. I heard on the news yesterday 7 people on motorcycles were killed. A guy in a pickup truck came over a ridge top and plowed into a biking group. Pretty much the news programs have death from diverse causes every day. Natural causes, vehicle accidents, weather incidents. There's another big tornado series going through even as we speak. Violence inflicted on and by others shows up in various media locations, on TV, the radio, print. Anybody remember newspapers? There was a column on Sundays specifically identifying the obituary events of the people who died in the last week. It's online, it's on social media. Thousands of people die every day. Pretty reasonable to assume that every one of them had the same gas gauge idea that you had, that it's not going to be them. It's likely they got the wrong answer on the gas gauge quiz question also. Now, if this was Oprah, I'd say, look underneath your seats and you'll find that you have a golden ticket. I want to tell you, I have to admit that I misspoke earlier when I said there was no right or wrong answer in regards to the gas gauge. That's not correct. The correct answer is answer E. You have no clue how much time you have left. Everyone from the last millennia should have automatically got that right, because on a multiple guess test, having a fifth answer of none of the above, that's the one that's correct. So the fact that we have no clue is another reason why this message is hard to deliver. Not only are we going to die, we don't know when. We think we have an idea. And again, it's going to happen way out there someplace. But the truth is, there's a non-zero probability that you won't be here next year. There's a non-zero probability that you will not be here next month. Non-zero for some people that you won't be here next week, but that's because you're living in another location, and that doesn't count. But there's a non-zero probability that you won't make it through to the end of this message. In fact, there's even a larger non-zero probability that you won't even hear the end of this message. Because not only is it possible that you could die, it's possible that I could die too. And in statistics and probability, if you have two separate items and you want to know the probability of either of them happening, you add the probabilities together. So one non-zero number added to a second non-zero number is larger than either one of them individually. So I really would like to finish this message, but there's a possibility that we won't. So, okay, well, what are the implications? The implications and the applications here. As I see it, there's 4 questions that need to be answered. What do we do? When do we do it? Why does it matter? And where do we go from here? Question 1, what do we do? Well, we make choices. And after all, you're making choices constantly anyways. Some of them are, you're aware of them, some of them not so much. Some choices that we make are trivial. You make choices about what you want to eat, where you're going to wear, where you want to go, what you want to do. Some of the choices that you make are not so much trivial. Things like dodgeball in traffic, or pulling the toast out of the toaster with a fork, or trying to earn a Darwin Award. There's actually a detailed description in the Bible in Joshua where this idea of making choices is presented. And so, chapter 24, Joshua starts that chapter with a description of the history. He recants the history of Israel, starting before the flood, going through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the descendants, the trip into Egypt and the slavery, and then the call from Egypt, and all the way through up to the day where they're in the land and Joshua is about ready to get done. And he says, throughout all of this time, God has given you land you did not labor, cities which you built not and dwell in them, of the vineyards and olive yards which ye planted not do ye eat. And then he gives the reviews of choices. In 14, now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and truth. Put away the gods of your fathers served on the other side of the flood and in Egypt, and serve ye the Lord. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve. Whether the gods your fathers served on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites, which dwell, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So he reviews the choice. The next thing that the people do is they rationalize their decision. They say, God has done all this for us. Of course we'll serve the Lord. They state the choice of their decision. Joshua, after they says, yes, we will serve the Lord, goes through and asks them to realize the consequences of their decision. He says, you can't serve the Lord, verse 19, for he's a holy God, a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions nor your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve strange gods, he will do you hurt, and consume you after he has done you good. The next step, the people, they reaffirm their choice. It's like, nope, we will serve the Lord. We'll do it. Joshua says, you sure? And they go, yep. And So finally, he record keeps the process. It says, okay, so he makes a covenant with the people that day in 25, sets a statute and ordinance in Shechem. He wrote it in the book of the law of God in verse 26. He puts a stone under an oak tree by the sanctuary and says, this stone is a witness to everything that you've said and everything that you've done. There's a proof that you can look back at that you made a choice. So this is an example of a process in making choices. So the first question was, what do we do? The second question was, when do we do it? In light of the non-zero probability of how much time you have left, I suggest that the time to do it is now, sooner if possible. Why? Well, if you fail to wait, if you wait too long, if you fail to make your decision, all of the lists of things that you would have, could have, or should have done ultimately become didn't. Too late. They're forever not done. Jesus spoke a parable. The ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully. You've heard this before. Thought to himself, what shall I do? There's no room in my barns. I said to myself, I'll tear down the barns and build more. I put all my fruits and labors in there, and then I will have many years to take my ease, eat, drink, and be merry. God said unto him, thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then whose will those things be? This guy was not thinking about an empty gas gauge. He obviously had thought that he was at least half a tank and had lots of time ahead of him. How about in James? Those who say, tomorrow we'll go into a city, continue a year, buy, sell, get gain. Don't you know your life is a vapor and passes away? The planning should be, if God wills, maybe we'll do this, we'll do that. The idea is making plans for the long run without considering the possibility that there even is a long run is foolish. So we've looked at what to do and when to do it. Why does it matter? Why do you need to make choices? Because after all, I'm just one person. Well, the short answer is you're not. This is not about you. Regardless of who you are, what you do, you have an impact that's much larger than you think it is. You have a local impact with your family, your friends, and neighbors. You also have an area impact. Employees, employers, businesses. The one that really doesn't apply is the funeral home, but we'll divert from that one. So you have a local impact, you have an area impact, but believe it or not, you also have a global impact. And you think, yeah, right, me? It's where the Kevin Bacon effect comes in. Kevin Bacon, for those of you who may be too young to remember, the idea is that you could connect any two actors or actresses with Kevin Bacon through 6 or less steps by movies that they work together. 6 degrees of separation means that you know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. Knows this guy. That's pretty short chain, but in essence, that reaches the whole globe. In 6 levels of separation, your impact, your life changes everybody on the whole planet in ways that you may not ever have a clue about. So, what do we do? When do we do it? What does it matter? Where do we go from here? I would suggest that we do an action plan. 3 points, again, properly built from a pastoral standpoint, because they're alliterative. The first step is reflect. Take time to consider your relationship stand right now with the people around you, with God, what's your relationship with God, with your family, your friends. You might also extend that to the people that you spend a great deal of time with, like your coworkers, your boss, your fellow students. The idea is to determine if there's any action that needs to be done to improve or correct or restore relationships in those circles. And after you reflect, you respond. You determine something needed to be done in step one, so do it. Take action as soon as possible, again, preferably now. The old saying, not to decide is to decide not to, applies in actions too. If you decide not to act, if you delay, basically, not acting when you know action is needed is to deny the need to act. That's what I had wrote down here. Delaying is denying. Remember, there's a non-zero probability that you'll make it to tomorrow, or tonight, or 22 minutes from now. And you don't need to be idle and not make an action because you can't get it completed. For example, if you determine you need to be baptized, just because you can't finish it immediately means there's no excuse to at least starting. You might, in order to make a restoration and to restore a relationship with someone, you might need to do more than just make a decision and respond. I knew this was a mistake. I should have added another slide in there. Make an action, take action. Back up one here. You didn't see that one yet. After you take an action on your decision, make sure to make a record of it. The last step in Joshua's example was the stone and the record. You write it down, or you tell somebody. You put up a stone as a reminder of your decision. Another old saying with a huge amount of truth is that if it wasn't written down, it never happened. And that's certainly true in business. So make it official by making it known, not to generate pride or to put a star on a sheet, but to help you to be accountable to following through. So we go from reflect to respond to rejoice, because you can know that you're in a better place because you are either in or at least closer to the center of God's will from getting something corrected that He points out to you. You've restored relationship will bring you closer to the people around you as well. So if you're still undecided or hesitant about an action that you might need to, that you need to take, but you just not sure about wanting to do it, let me share one last thought, the parable of the two sons in Matthew. So a certain man had two sons. He came to the first and said, "Son, go and work in my vineyard." And the son says, "I will not," but afterwards repented of the will of the father. And then people says, "Well, the first one did." Because I should point out to you that decisions are important. Actions are more important. So decide and then take action. Make Yoda proud. Let's pray. Our Father, our God, thank you. This message was hard to give, hard to hear, hard to do. Yet there was a reason you wanted it given. Move hearts by your Spirit to take time to make the hard choices necessary to be in the center of your will. Encourage the choices to be followed by actions and testimonies of how your will is being carried out. Lord, we ask that you go ahead of us as we enter the mission field of your kingdom here in Lansing. Make our lights visible to those struggling in the darkness. We thank you for these things in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. And who is doing announcements?
So I'm not actually the one supposed to do announcements, but it's John Nugent. And if any of you have been getting the Slack messages or whispers from other people. He's not doing so well today. His back is acting up again, apparently as bad as it was the last time he had to actually have surgery because of it. I'm going to do some announcements, but then I also want to end just with a prayer for John. He's on his way to the U of M ER right now. So just prayer that they can help with the pain and that hopefully it's something quicker and easier than it was last time. I do have a couple of announcements I just want to make sure everybody's aware of. And one is this service that we have together is really meant to be for Wednesday or Thursday. If you want to learn more about that, talk to, I think it's Caleb at the back table there, who's raised his hand up. Also, we like to eat together. It's one of the things we do to get to know each other and share lives with one another. So if you haven't taken an opportunity to have lunch with us, we'd love to take you out to lunch and just learn more about you, get to know you, and answer any questions you might have about us. If you want to take it a step further, we have an awesome opportunity this afternoon to help with the roofing project. That's another thing we love to do together is help each other out in concrete ways. And so there's a family that has a massive roof that needs a lot of work, and this project started Friday, went all day yesterday, is happening pretty much the rest of the day today. 2 o'clock, thank you. 2 o'clock, so get some lunch, enjoy that time, and then go ready to work hard. I did notice there's a little survey on our Slack channel that says like who's going to be there, and I only saw 5 people, of one of which I think was John, which I doubt he's going to make it back since, not doing so hot. So if you are available, I didn't think you would be, or if you can make yourself available, that'd be awesome. Maybe talk to Bunce about details of how you can help. I know there's ways you can help not on the roof, there's ways to help on the roof, all sorts of different ways to participate in that if you want to. There was another email that went out last week with a survey for time to meet. This was a follow-up from our church life meeting. It looks like July 8th is going to be the only time, but if you haven't chimed in on that, please do. If you don't know what I'm talking about, either don't worry about it or come ask me later. I can fill you in. And I think that's it for announcements. Maybe kickball probably tomorrow, or no, or I don't know.
Doing it right now.
Okay.
Kickball, 6 o'clock, Sharp Park.
6 o'clock, Sharp Park, as long as it doesn't get rained out. Either go and participate and or cheer them on. Evening. Yep. So, no time has been set in stone or anything, but yeah, I did get the memo that it's kickball that night. All right, so I think that's all for the announcements. So I'm just going to go ahead and say a prayer for John, and then we'll be dismissed. Lord God, we thank you for John Nugent and the way that he is part of our body, that he participates with us and even pushes himself apparently beyond what his body can bear to support the work of this church. We pray that you will comfort him and heal his body, that you will both take care of his needs and also take care of his disappointment about his body not being able to do the things it has in the past and that he would like it to be able to do. I pray that you will help us to be an encouragement and support to him, and that you will help him find new and different ways to participate in our life together, and that you will be with doctors as they try to resolve whatever is going on in his back so that he can get back to normal as quickly as possible. It's in your son's name we pray. Amen.